The first step in developing a robust business requirements document is, in fact, understanding your customer. And it's important to note that value of your strategic initiative comes not from what you say it should be, but from what your customer gets out of it. And I'm referencing here this quote from Peter Drucker. I think it's also important to consider that customer is a broad term. There is the big C customer, the external customer to the organization that lays down good money for the product or service that your company provides. It's also important to consider your internal stakeholders as important customers as well. This is particularly important for IT organizations who serve the entire organization and have a body of users that they need to treat as customers, not as merely stakeholders in the development efforts that they undertake. And so we're going to walk through a process of talking about customers and how to see value from the customer perspective. We will use the Kano model to describe how customers view value. Noriaki Kano developed this model in the 1980s. He identified that customers' needs exist at both a conscious and a subconscious level. So simply asking the customer what they want only answers part of the questions of how the customer views value. Kano was able to identify 3 types of needs, and understanding these needs is done through plotting the needs across 2 dimensions. The first is on the vertical axis, and that is where we plot customer satisfaction. It ranges from highly satisfied at the top through to neutral to not very or not satisfied at all at the bottom. The horizontal axis plots how well the need was executed. On the far right-hand side of the axis, this is where the company executed it quite well. And then on the left-hand side, they either did it not at all or very poorly. And in between, you have a neutral reaction. Now, the first need is the spoken need, the needs that we call performance needs. They can either satisfy or dissatisfy. They are top of mind when you ask the customer what they want. The customer's satisfaction is in direct proportion to how well you execute in fulfilling those needs. So take internet speed, for example. The faster the download or upload speeds, the happier the customer is. At the bottom end, if you do 1 megabit per second or less in terms of download, you're probably not going to get a very happy customer. Perhaps in the mid-range, 10 to 15 megs might give you into the neutral to okay satisfied range. And if you're at the 30 to 50 megabit per second range, you're going to be pretty darn satisfied with the speed of your internet service. Next are basic needs. And basic needs are needs that really aren't thought of by the customer. And their absence only can lead to dissatisfaction, but their presence does not lead to satisfaction. They are the givens and are not often thought of unless they're not there. When you dial your number on your mobile phone, you expect a call to go through. Unless, of course, you're like me, you're an AT&T iPhone customer, then maybe you don't expect it. But in any case, more for everybody else, you dial the number and you expect the call to go through. If it doesn't go through, you're pretty upset. But if it goes through, you're not exactly thrilled. You're not going to send a letter to AT&T saying, hey, thank you for the exceptional service. You expect the call to go through. Same goes with putting your card in an ATM machine. You expect the cash to come out. Same with when you turn the ignition on your car, you expect the car to start. And it's only when those things don't happen that you're dissatisfied, but you're not really satisfied when a company does it. At the other end of the spectrum are the excitement needs. These are the innovations. They thrill customers when they're provided, but they don't cause dissatisfaction when they're absent, mainly because the customers aren't aware that these are really needs that are in their conscious mind. There are elements of a product or a service that really the customer really never knew that they wanted. A cell phone with a camera was probably once an excitement need. Needs change over time. And what you'll see is that needs that excited yesterday will be asked for today and will be expected tomorrow. Perhaps that camera in the cell phone is a prime example of a need that was one time an excitement need that may be now a performance need, or maybe even a basic need that is expected. The iPhone keyless interface might be another. When it first came out, it was pretty exciting, but now it's pretty much expected that mobile phones should have that keyless user interface. Our ability to understand these needs actually vary based on the kind of need. So remember, basic needs, if you ask a customer, what do you want? You're not going to get the basic needs. You're only going to understand those needs when they don't occur. So typically it's customer complaints that tell you what those basic needs are. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on the product or service that you're rolling out. It could be on a related product or service in your company, or even your competitor's product or service, to see what customers are complaining about with regards to that, what's missing. Competitive analysis, taking a look at what the competition provides and where they either disappoint customers or anger customers. That might be an area where you can understand basic needs. And industry analysis does the same sort of thing, and as well as providing services that meet a known standard. Standards typically are things that are expected. And then there's a tool called an FMEA, Failure Modes Effect Analysis. Now, understanding performance needs is probably the easiest needs which to gather information. This is where if you ask a customer, they'll tell you. So focus groups or customer surveys or even data mining all give an indication of what those performance needs might be. And the last group is understanding excitement needs. This is where it's a little bit harder. And the process you go through is some sort of systematic innovation process. And while it's pretty complex and it uses some pretty complex tools, we're not going to go into that in a fair amount of detail. But know that the jobs to be done, what I asked you to read, understanding the jobs to be done gives you an insight into what that innovation might be, which would provide an excitement need. If you understand what job the customer is trying to perform, then you might find a different tool or a different way to actually get hired for that job. TRIZ is another example. It's a pretty complex process, but basically it looks at the 39 known sources of benefit as well as sources of pain or detraction, and basically puts those on a matrix and then uses some known techniques by evaluating. Basically what someone did is they went through and they looked at all the patents that were ever filed for and granted, and they were able to categorize the problem-solving methods that were exhibited by those patents into one of 40 different groups. Pretty complex process, interesting and worth looking into if you're interested in that sort of thing. And then biomimicry, basically looking at nature and seeing how nature particularly solves problems and mimicking that. A great book, and where I get, as you know, several of the readings that I've asked you to read come from the Innovator's Toolkit. You could do worse by spending, I think it's not a cheap book. I want to say it's $29.95 or maybe even $39.95. It's a great book. It has lots of tools, particularly if you're interested in the area of innovation, and it has quite a few, and I use it all the time. And like I said, you got exposed to it a little bit with the jobs to be done, outcome expectations. You're going to read one, in fact, we'll talk about this shortly, the SIPOC. By the way, these authors, David Silverstein, Philip Samuels, and Neil DiCarlo, they actually run a company called Breakthrough Management Group International, BMGI. They're an innovation and process improvement consulting company and do a fair amount of training. They're a pretty top-notch company. Give their website a look. They have a lot of interesting things, and if you're interested in the area of process improvement, they're a great way to get trained and become a green belt or a black belt. In any case, this ends our discussion of how to understand your customer and the customer view of value.